بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to Islamic Oasis Live. Alhamdulillah, today we're very honored to have a guest, Sister Zakiya, who is, alhamdulillah, somebody who is a community leader, da'iya, somebody who's been calling to Islam in Chicago for many years now, alhamdulillah. She herself has accepted the deen, and subhanallah, like many others, this is a story where somebody, I believe, inshallah, the sister, she can, let us know herself, but these stories are very important for those of us that are already Muslim, those of us who have accepted Islam, to kind of connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to think about, that core essential, heart of the deen, which is connecting with the creator, with seeking out the truth, which is, so core to our lives as human beings. As well as, for those that are interested in Islam, you may find the story very uh, beneficial, uh, to hear how one person, alhamdulillah, was guided to the truth and found out basically their place in the world. Subhanallah. So, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Zakiya. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. All is well. All is well.
Good.
I guess let's start here. So, how many years have you been Muslim now? When did you accept Islam?
Subhanallah. Um, I fully accepted Islam in 2002.
Hmm.
Um, that's when I did all of my research and found all of my answers and ran out of all the excuses not to do what I needed to do. And subhanallah, November of 2002, I took my shahada, mashallah. So 22 years, mashallah.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. What was your background like growing up, kind of religiously and culturally?
I guess like anybody else's, you grew up in a household, and whatever your mom and dad are doing, that's kind of what you take hold to. We grew up as a Christian family, mashallah. My grandmother was Christian, my mom was Christian, and we ended up, going to church on Sundays, Bible study, choir rehearsal, all of those good things, church picnics and everything. We actually had a gospel singing group. My sisters and I, we were called the Urban Girls, and we would travel around the city, to different churches and programs, singing gospel songs, praising the Lord, as we said. Um, I grew up south side of Chicago in the projects, Icky knew. The oldest of seven. So life was pretty rambunctious. We had a large family. And even though, Christianity was, our faith, we just still anyway had a good core understanding of, what God was through our family.
Hmm.
My grandmother was very strong. Um, she had 13 children. So my mom is one of
SubhanAllah.
13. My dad, he had a very small family, but they were very powerful people. So these two things mix, and I mean, life was pretty rambunctious, as you can imagine, with seven girls in the house, mashallah. So we did like everybody else, got up Sunday morning, pressed their hair out, and we went to church. We went
So,
to church.
was going to church for you guys, was it kind of like more of a cultural thing or like a traditional thing? Basically, I guess in the sense, obviously your parents were taking you, right? Or your family's taking you to church
For
every
the
day.
most
But
part.
how much were you guys into it, I guess?
I mean, it was central to our lives.
Mm.
Going to church 3 or 4 times a week, you
Oh,
had to prepare for that. Whether it was for a Bible study or, like I said, choir rehearsal, or going for the sermon, and the sermon was like from Sunday morning all the way to Sunday night.
really?
So it was a pretty big, part of our lives and what we did. So it being traditional and cultural at the same time, kind of coincided for us because at church was family. Your friends were at church. All the people that you interacted with, the same people that were your age. So it was pretty much pretty active, in integrating our family and our community because we were all at the same church.
Mm. Yeah, subhanAllah, that's like really involved because I feel like a lot of people with their experience, like as a Christian, you hear this a lot, that people kind of their parents are like drag them to church, and it's like once a week, like it's almost a ceremonial thing. But subhanAllah, you're coming from a family where they're very like involved, very it was a big part in their
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah, yeah, you spent a lot of time at the church, in the kitchen, helping with meals and dinner. Again, with choir rehearsal, we were big on that part, so we were there for an extended amount of time, and it just seemed like that was just part of life, you
Mm,
know. But it kind of showed me what the basis of belief and understanding could be, because I think that's something that's innately in us to kind of come together on the same terms, on the same grounds, as family, as friends, and be able to carry out and live out what those things are that you share.
mm,
And because most of the people in the church was my family, it kind of had a double edge. So, we were always together for that reason, and then we were always together, just because we were family. So, a lot of community, a lot of togetherness, a lot of things that we did as a family because we were at the same church. Um, kind of made it, you know, just part of our lives.
mm. So this
Yeah.
is this a Baptist church, or which kind of like branch are we talking about here?
Okay. So that's when things get kind of gray, at least for me, because
Mm,
I never knew like what kind of church we went to. I just knew we went to church. Uh, but I remember, Pentecostal, um, Baptist, Church of God in Christ. These are just some terms that I remember hearing as I came up. But again, I never really knew like what denomination we were.
mm,
I don't know if that's bad or not. So, we just went to church. And again, this was because mom, would take us, or in a lot of cases would send us to church. So it was just something that we did. And to this day, I still don't know,
mm.
what denomination it is. I know that's bad. I know that's bad, but
I mean,
I just didn't pay attention to it.
there's also like those churches where they're kind of I think I forgot the technical term for it, but it's basically like all denominations go there. So it's not
Yeah, like a non-denominational.
yeah, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
word. That's the word.
Yeah, but
So
I don't think this was that.
mm,
Yeah, this was Holy Circle on the west side. It was a small little storefront. And incidentally, our neighbors to the church were Muslims.
interesting. Oh,
They had a little corner store that we would go in and get our candy and juice and pop and stuff like that in between sermons. And subhanallah, I'm just thinking of that now, like how ironic that was, them being next door to the church. And I mean, we like banging it out, tambourines and drums and, all sorts of music and everything. And just knowing now that they were, Muslim, probably having to make salah, probably fasted for the month of
mm,
Ramadan. Alhamdulillah. Allah knows best what He's doing.
subhanallah. So what was the first interaction with Islam or Muslims? Like, when did you start to figure out that there is something called Islam?
Mm, I was probably I was probably about 14. I was you know, in that in between age, not quite a child, but obviously not an adult. And my dad would come around. My dad,
Mm,
he wasn't like a live-in dad, so we didn't see him, sometimes for periods of times. And he battled a lot of sickness, addictions, and things like that. So we didn't see him a lot, and when we did, it was pretty memorable.
mm,
Sometimes traumatic, sometimes scary even. Um, and I remember one day I was out and about, playing around, and I saw him. Now, when you're a little girl and you live in an environment like the projects on the south side of Chicago, most of your friends don't know their dad, don't see their dad. Dads are just like this irrelevant thing. And I
subhanallah.
remember seeing him, and I'm like, yo, that's my daddy. And even with everything that would go on and happen in our, household and in our family, just to be a little girl to see your daddy, I was still elated. My heart was still excited and full to see him. And this particular time that I saw him, he looked a little different. Like the energy around him, his spirit seemed calm, and he seemed to be focused on something, and it was just this difference. I like to say sometimes that was the first time I saw my dad stand up stand up straight like a man.
Subhanallah.
When I saw him this day, and of course, hey daddy, how you doing? Oh, can I get $1? you know, and I just remember him, speaking in this tone, and I don't know, it was just something, and he said something like "Assalama." I could just remember "Alaikum," you know, and he was telling me to say "Assalamu alaikum." And I'm like,
Mm,
what is that? Like, I asked for $1, yo. I don't know what you're trying to give me, but and he just kept saying "Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum," and I'm like, okay. And so that was the first time that I even realized that there was another faith,
mm,
period. Not even just Islam, but just that there was another faith. And I still was like, what is this? Where is he coming from? And because he was such, well, I'm not really eccentric, but because he was such a huge presence, you kind of never knew what dad was going to bring. You never knew what he was, going to surprise you with. And so hearing him say these words, these new words that I had never heard before, that intrigued me. And
mm.
so I started to pay attention when I would see him around the neighborhood. After that, he would always give us salam. So that was my first encounter with something other than Christianity. Yeah.
Interesting, subhanallah. Yeah, I guess it's crazy to think about, I mean, even if you learn about, there's other religions in school and other ways of life and stuff like that, it seems like almost like far away. I guess if you're living in that type of environment where everybody's all the same, right? They're all the
Yeah.
same religion, everything
Yeah.
like that.
And
It's
it's
different when
not
you
even that it's,
actually.
yeah, it's not even that it's far away. It just doesn't exist.
Hmm,
You have no sense of it whatsoever. You only know what you know.
subhanallah. So was it did your dad kind of try to teach you about like what is Islam? Like did he tell you like, hey, I am a Muslim? Or was it kind of just like these
Um,
interactions that
kind of
started to get
both.
an idea?
Yeah, kind of both. Like I said, I was, in this in between stage, so I was probably around 14, 15. That's not a really good age for a fatherless girl, just not knowing. And I'm sure at some point he did explain, I'm this or I'm that, but I was so hung up on the fact that this was something different from what I usually see. To be honest, it made me skeptical.
Hmm.
I'm like, in the back of my mind, like, what is he on now? What is he bringing now? What is he trying to shove down our throats, now? Because this was something we had never heard of. We go to church every week. I never heard Assalamu alaikum. I never heard Islam. So it was almost like I was kind of bracing myself too, like, what's this about to be about? You know?
Hmm.
So but the one thing that I did do is I watched him. I watched him. I was aware that my dad was an alcoholic. I was aware that he was a drug addict. He was a military man, so he had all those kind of conditions and issues and things. Um, but after he became Muslim, like I said, his demeanor just changed, and so I started to watch him. Like, I'm ready to see him come out of his bag. I'm ready to see him come out of disguise. I'm ready to
Hmm.
see, the real essence of whatever this Islam thing is, because it can't be good. That's what was in the back of my mind, for real. And so I watched him for a number of years,
Hmm.
until um, I think he was telling me something about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, as a Christian child growing up, all I knew and heard was Jesus alayhi salam. And of course, Moses and Abraham, and all of the people who are, all of the prophets that are known, from the Bible and Christianity. And when he was trying to tell me about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm like, aha, here it is. Here is that moment that it all falls to pieces. And so I'm like, I don't know anything about no Muhammad. All I know is Jesus Christ, alayhi salam. So um, I don't really pick up on, these little pieces that he's leaving for me until way later.
Hmm.
But this kind of piqued me because like I said, I was skeptical. So I'm like, who is this Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And that sent me on the search. That sent me on a real big search. Subhanallah.
Interesting. Subhanallah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing to hear that it's like, you know, after, yeah, like around the time he's accepting the deen, he's kind of changing his whole life around. So that
Yeah.
means, I mean, that's a huge effect right there. People see
Mm-hmm.
the transformative effect of Islam on people. So big.
Alhamdulillah. I just recently told him that I used to watch him like that, you know. And I remember the first time I saw him make salah. Now, I didn't know what he was doing. Um, I was just I was at his house, and I don't know what I was looking for or doing. I think I was looking for him. And I ended up walking into this room, and I saw him on the floor. I think he had just maybe come up from prostration from sujood, and he was sitting. And again, I'm really big on like energy and things like that. The energy around him, as you know now, that comes with Salah, it was so calm. It was so still, and it was peaceful. And I had never seen my father in a position where he was humble, where he was vulnerable, where he was submitting. My father is a very, very strong energy, a very strong person, the character. He's very big and not flamboyant, but his energy is huge. And to see him in that position, it did something to me. So now
Hmm.
I'm even more intrigued because I'm wondering who this Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. I'm wondering why your energy and why you seem so calm and so at peace and so focused nowadays. And now I'm wondering what are you doing on the floor? And like, How are you so comfortable in that peace on the floor? You
Yes,
know,
subhanAllah.
so
It's a
yeah,
huge difference, I guess,
that-
from the church where, you know, there's so much like I mean, there's music playing, people singing out loud. They're like jumping out of their
yeah,
seats.
yeah, yeah. That's literally church. And so for us, that literally became praise. You
Mm,
know, you wasn't praising the Lord right if you wasn't clapping hard enough and stomping your feet and, really, sure. But to see the opposite, to
mm.
see him be still, um, and almost like you could see him be in the presence of Allah.
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, that was huge. That got me.
What was your first like I guess way of researching about Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? What did you go to the library? Did you go online? Did you go?
um, well, first I started asking people, like, you ever heard about this Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You know anything about this? And have you ever heard this? And most people, of course, was like, like I don't know what you're talking about. And I re- I remember like, okay, the gig is up. This is some fictional person, and that he's making up. But alhamdulillah, what it made me do is it made me research Jesus. Alayhi salam.
So did you start to
I
think
wanted
like,
to.
what if it's the same thing in the Bible? What if it's the same thing in Christianity? Like if
No, I wasn't that sophisticated.
okay.
Mm-mm. Because the thing was, I was bent on proving him wrong. The whole
Mm,
reason I'm researching, the whole reason I'm looking, the whole reason I'm getting it is so that I can come back and be like, I told you something about this ain't right. And so, my intention was to find the information so that I know I have this information and then dispel the whole thing.
mm,
So when I started to search about Jesus, alayhi salam, that was the key because I'm like, okay, he's talking about this Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I never heard of and I don't know. And I'm claiming to have this, adherence to Jesus. I don't even really know too much about him.
mm.
So I'm like, okay, let me go and research and look into Jesus, alayhi salam. So that way, two things can happen. I can find out more about who Jesus, alayhi salam, is, and I can kind of, help him along the way to understand so he can get off this Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam thing. You know what I mean? So that was a couple of things, twirling around in my intentions and in my little head. Um, that kind of sparked this, and it took 7 years. It
Mm.
took 7 years that I studied and went through and learned. I was actually trying to think of it today. I wanted to find it, but I came across this book, Jesus in Islam.
Mm.
Huh? Jesus in Islam? Oh, I don't know about this. I'm thinking I'm gonna take this Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Bible more than I'm gonna take this Jesus alayhi salam in Islam. That's unheard of. And I read this book, and it talked about all the attributes of Jesus alayhi salam, what his mission was, what God intended for us to get from him, and then all the events and things that happened. So I was very shocked to find this detailed presence of information about Jesus alayhi salam in Islam. That blew me. And so now I'm at a conundrum. I got a problem because I'm trying to dispel what he's saying to me about Islam with getting a better understanding of what I know as a Christian. And this information is starting to crisscross. It's starting to get mangled and tangled. And so I don't see clearly anymore because what I thought was a myth and I wanted to dispel was starting to actually connect itself to what I already knew and believed. So,
Mm. SubhanAllah. So before you were kind of I guess you were engaging more with uh were they like Christian sources or something like that? Some talking about what is Islam from like written by Christians, kind of with a biased perspective. Where were you getting? What were you looking at?
Um, so again, like I said, I started asking people. I started
Yeah.
to ask around in the church, elders in the church, and then up until pastors and ministers and deacons. I wanted some official something. Because I can't be the only one who ain't never heard of this, and it's such a big impact. And what I got mostly was, don't worry about that. Um, oh, we don't ask questions, we just believe.
Mm.
Jesus is, he's encompassing of all these things. It was just, so many different responses that intrigued me too, because I'm like, yo, wait a minute. Nah, if we all supposed to be on this same thing, why we don't know the same stuff? Why are we not giving the same or even close to responses? It was just like they was pulling stuff out.
So now it's you have this book, this talking about the Anbiya, about Isa alayhi salam, about Jesus, peace be upon him, from the Islamic perspective. And this is kind of like opening your mind a little bit, like, wow, they have a whole comprehensive view, or like a whole understanding about this prophet, that I didn't know that this was even in Islam, that they even uh, believed in the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. So
You mean as Muslims or as Christians?
no, like when you found that book where it's like Jesus in Islam.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That blew me because again, I didn't know about Islam, let alone Jesus being so close and connected to it. And then don't forget the fact that as a Christian, my belief was that Jesus alayhi salam was Allah, was God, Astaghfirullah.
Mm, yeah.
And so him being a prophet or a messenger wasn't prevalent because in our belief, he's God, you know. So reading so much information about how Allah was using him and then using his own words. I don't know if you ever read the Bible, but um, in the Bible, there's one version of the Bible is called the Red Letter Edition,
Mm,
and so it's supposed to have Jesus's alayhi salam's own words in red lettering. So this is actually what Jesus alayhi salam said. And so I would go through my Bible and read those things and found that hey, I'm supposed to seek knowledge and understanding. So I'm supposed to seek the information and then I'm supposed to try to understand it. So if I gotta understand it, then I have to ask questions. So now there's this notion that, wait a minute. But as Christians, y'all telling me we don't ask questions, but here I am reading in the red letter version in
mm.
Jesus' Salam's own words that I'm supposed to. Hmm. And so again, I told you this took 7 years. So I keep coming to these different walls, and every time Allah would dissolve it with a better understanding of this thing, subhanAllah.
Subhanallah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So it's that's an interesting thing that you think about. The shift from just like a blind following or a blind belief to the order that you need to know your creator. You need to know with like a certainty. Even the idea that you can reach certainty, I mean, that's huge for somebody who is like coming from that background where their whole idea of, uh, I guess, like, religion or a way of life, it's all based on just speculation. Nobody really knows for sure. That's why everybody has to, or at least,
Yeah.
they're thinking that everybody is basically just like faking it till they make it, I guess. They're
Mhm.
thinking everybody else is doing exactly the same thing. Muslims must be the same way, just like
Yeah.
any other religion. That idea that
Yeah.
you could know with a certainty and prove it is like a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah, it wasn't just an assumption. It wasn't just something somebody was telling me and passing down. I'm actually learning that, this is real and it has a history.
Mm.
So, that was another aspect that I had to put together. And I'm so grateful to Allah for even my train of thought, because I could have got lost and shifted up in all of the information, a long time ago. But um, my understanding of not only the spiritual or the religious aspect of it, but the history, like the real
Mm.
tangible history, like what other cultures thought about Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, what their stamp was in history, how they were as human beings and as people. And so I had to step out of the realm of the religion and find out who these guys were. And that's when Allah blew the whole top off the situation.
Subhanallah.
Um, because I then learned that as a Christian, I only knew Jesus. And like I said, I heard, Moses and Adam and Abraham, and, heard of all the other prophets, but there was, for me, never the connection. They were just these, people. But learning in Islam that they are all connected.
Mm.
Even now I'm learning, like, through some of the lineage, like the bloodline, that they're all connected, kind of gives this clearance of Allah, having this point that he's, consistently making over time through these people, through these prophets and messengers. So subhanallah. And so now I'm starting to get an understanding that this is a whole thing. This is not just about going to church. This is not just about, praising the Lord. This is about how I live my life now. This is about who I am as a person, what I am as a person. And just because I live in the projects and I grew up on the south side of Chicago and I ain't got much, don't mean that Allah won't bless you with
Subhanallah.
information and understanding and coming out of that ignorance. That's what I'm getting at, mashallah.
Mm.
So it was a notion.
So you said that it took like 7 years for you to kind of take the Shahada to finally accept it. Was there a time uh, where your research or your search for the truth kind of became more serious? Was it like that from the beginning, and you were just kind of like just trying to be as thorough as you can, trying to look up every single thing?
All that.
Mm.
Again, so let me see. When I started, I was maybe like 15, 16. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Um, so from about 15 till about 23. Okay. I'm I'm graduating high school. I'm going off to college. I'm finding out who I am as a person, as a young woman. Um, I'm falling down. I'm making mistakes. I'm being wretched and treacherous, and but I'm in and out, taking these moments and getting this clarity, putting it all together. Um, of course, now by the time I'm in my early 20s, I'm realizing I ain't really about to go back and tell this man that he's wrong. Because now Allah has revealed to me, He has shown me so much, that I'm starting to be aware that, okay, yeah, yeah, this is something. This is real. There's something to it. And I remember coming home from school one break or so, and my dad, he was so excited. He was like, okay, come on, you coming with me? And, I'm going with daddy. So I'm excited we going. He took me to this small little masjid. It was on 86 and Ashland in Chicago. And if you know, you know. Um, it was very small. And again, the energy wasn't the, church praise the Lord. It was really, calm and focused and clear. And I remember my dad, of course, the men and the women were in separate areas. And I remember him coming to me afterwards, and all these people started to come around us. And he was like, okay, put your finger up like this. And I want you to repeat after me. I'm a daddy's girl. So, I can't wait. So, okay, dad, yeah, this and that, da 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 da. And then when he finished, everybody, of course, erupted in applause and Allahu Akbar and Takbir and, all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, and I left. I'm like, okay, bye. And people, started congratulating me and I'm like, what just happened? Um, Fast forward a few years later, um, by this time I'm well aware, a little more mature, a lot more older. So I called my family when I decided I was going to take Shahada.
Hmm.
And I said, I want y'all to meet me at the masjid. We were at this beautiful place called Al Fatir in Chicago, 47. And I was like, I want y'all to meet me up there, come up there and do this. And we got there. When the khutbah was over, the imam always asked, is there anybody who wants to accept Islam today? And so my heart is beating fast, but I'm so sure at this point. I know now. I'm clear. And so I put my hand and I'm like, yeah, I wanna take my shahada. Subhanallah. It still gives me chills to this day because the brother was just so like, okay, what's up? Why you want to be Muslim? And I mean, this is in front of the people in the masjid after Jumu'ah. And he asked me, do you have any questions before you do this? I said, yeah. Okay, what am I supposed to do with Jesus? What am I supposed to do with Jesus Christ? And subhanAllah, he broke down, follow him, revere him, and wait for him because he's coming back. And
Hmm.
when he said that he's coming back part, I was like, okay, man, that was like the tape. That was everything that sealed everything for me because that was the only thing, that hadn't been covered was Jesus's return, alayhi salam,
Hmm.
in Islam. And so when he said that, I was like, yep, yep. So the only person that I have to now, convince is myself. And so I took Shahada that day, La ilaha illallah. I did.
MashaAllah,
And
tabarakallah.
subhanAllah, I remember right after my dad came up to me like, yo, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just took Rosh Hashanah. He was like, you did that already. Years. And I was like, I had no idea. I didn't know that's what I was doing. SubhanAllah. But now, today, I do. MashaAllah. So taking
Alhamdulillah.
Shahada that day, changed my life, as you can, understand. I don't know, were you born Muslim?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I was born Muslim.
Okay.
Still, it's like,
Okay.
I think for everybody, um, even if you're born Muslim, there is like a point in time where you need to reflect on things. I mean, this is just key for everybody, right? They need to establish that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to self reflect, think about their own life, their place in the world.
Yeah.
This is like absolutely key. Um, yeah. Anyways,
So there's a time where you kind of have to accept it for yourself, not just because it's part of your family or your history.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm, that's what I was getting at. There's, you need to think about these things for yourself and like, research about, I'm Muslim. Alhamdulillah, if you're in a Muslim family, you learn a lot of things when you're younger, right? But sometimes it can be the case that they, we don't think or reflect about these things. When we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, or when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, He's creator of the universe, there is nothing like him, he has always existed, then we know these things. But the reflection part, like having kind of that moment where you're thinking deeply, okay, I've said my whole life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing like him, that he's the
Yeah,
creator.
on connect.
Now when you start to think about these things, it has so much of a deeper meaning, and that understanding of the aqidah, then the understanding of the belief in Islam, it like, that's the ma'rifah, that's the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a
Yeah.
person, you know, they acquire by will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which it puts like a whole shift on your life. Your whole perspective
Yes.
changes when you grasp
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
And that's the conclusion that I came to as well. And that's the reason why I do you were asking me about the podcast earlier. Um that's the reason why I do it, the ghetto Muslim. uh, really just relating and sharing stories about being Muslim, just in this society, in this culture, and in this environment today, and how to capture it in your true essence, and how to capture it in your true life. Like you ain't gotta fake the funk. You ain't gotta be, more than whatever. You just being whoever you are, and
Mm,
whatever that light is about Islam, Allah is gonna shine that through you, regardless. And so taking that understanding, wholeheartedly for myself or for oneself is important because it's going to be tailored, super tailored, not only to life in general, but specifically to yours, to your life, you know. And so that's what we kind of talk about on my podcast, just how everyday life, being Muslim, not knowing everything, continuing to still study and learn, but keeping true to who and what I am, you know?
mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
SubhanAllah. That's like the core of uh, I guess the core of the deen is that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that like perspective change,
yeah,
if we can call it that. SubhanAllah, uh, Islam is spread through, like, four corners of the world. It's gone
yeah,
through every single, like, nation of people. And SubhanAllah, the Aqidah is all the same. The way that we practice Islam, pretty much same. Uh, and it's like, it's been able to bring these people together in, like, an authentic type of way. Each,
yeah.
uh, I like to say, like, in these places that have been Muslim for a long time, Islam became like in the soil, in the like,
Mm,
it became part of the people. You know what I mean?
yes,
The people
yeah,
believed in Allah, they believed in Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they followed them, and that became like, the biggest difference in their life.
yeah,
It's not.
yeah,
I wonder what was it like, back in the day? Because now even still people, they have this kind of misconception that Islam is, an Arab religion. You recite the Quran in Arabic, you have your prayers in Arabic. You know,
yeah,
Arabs, they went throughout different places in the world, and they had the what we call in Islam the futuhat, the opening uh, of these places, so people can learn about the Deen.
yeah,
Like, that military aspect is there, of course, in the history. Uh, that's a different, like, kind of discussion. But unfortunately, we still have people that think that, even though the majority of Muslims on the world are actually in Indonesia, they're not even Arab.
yes. I love telling people that, like, with me being African American or Black or however you want to phrase it, I often get paired with the Nation of Islam.
Mm,
And I love, telling people, just because I'm Black and I'm Muslim, it doesn't mean that I'm with the nation. It's not disrespect to the nation, which is an organization for Muslims, if they wish, but it's not the Deen of Islam. And I love telling people that the largest population of Muslims around the world are actually Asian, not Arab or Middle Eastern. And, to see the light come on, like, do you really think that Allah, that our creator who sent us, made us, created us, would pick out a small line or group of people and no, and that's going to be for all of us. So getting out of this notion that, there's a certain race or a certain people or a certain culture that adhere to Islam was the first myth that I had to bust for myself.
mm,
um, when I started to see the plethora of different nationalities and background and statuses, and it was just amazing because literally it's just like everybody. Everybody, mashallah. There's different people, all backgrounds, all people, all that are Muslim. And seeing this again made me study even more, made me look even more because now I wanted to know how did this go so long without me realizing what it is. And so when you see Islam move across the world, um, Asia, Africa, Spain, um, you start to see the impact of Islam around the world. You start to be, oh, okay, so this isn't all inclusive. This is not, you know, me and my little people over here versus everybody over there. No, Allah used this to bring all of us together under the, umbrella of La ilaha illallah. So this became something that intrigued me even more and, made me go and study, even more and now even more in depth. So now I'm looking at how it was taught, how Islam was taught. And of course, there's this big notion that Islam was spread through the sword. And I always encourage people to open a book, go and really learn because the context is what's going to be the defining factor. You can't just hear, oh, Islam was spread through the sword and not realize what was happening, or not
Mm.
read or understand what was happening and why that came out to be, the case. So this, studying, and of course, while you're studying, that's making you get closer to Allah because you realize it more and more His mercies, His majesties, just giving you the capacity to even hold and understand this information, giving you the wherewithal and the will to go and search for this information. I tell people all the time, I feel more connected to Jesus alayhi salam, as a Muslim than I ever did as a Christian
Mm.
because I'm actually doing what he told us to do. I'm actually following um, what Jesus alayhi salam, showed for us. I remember reading in my Bible about it describes Jesus alayhi salam praying on his face,
Yep.
and at the time I'm like, huh? Wait a minute, how does that go? Like, I never even heard of that. And so it did two things for me at that time. I'm like, okay, yo, if Jesus is praying on his face, number one, who is he praying to?
Mm.
Jesus praying? Like, who is he praying to? And how do one pray on their face? And so I started to look things up, and the only people that I saw who prayed in that way or prayed on their face were Muslims. And that got me. So I started to understand that Jesus alayhi salam prays to Allah, prays to God, his creator, and this is the way that he prays. And so as a Muslim, I'm following his example,
Mm.
closer to Jesus alayhi salam as a Muslim.
So
MashaAllah.
it's interesting to see that one of the places that we think about as a heartland of Islam, that today it probably has like, 90+% of the population is Muslim. Syria, Sham, that
Mm.
area of the Levant, right? So
Yeah,
this is one of the
yeah.
places, right, that uh, became like ruled by the Muslims that, really early on, maybe like, not even 50 years after the passing of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of the Prophet Muhammad
So,
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So even though that happened early on, right, it's very interesting to see the process in which the Levant became majority Muslim. And this is a place, if you read the history a little bit, then you'll see it was a place where, you had a lot of Christians. You had, I
yeah.
think, what's called the Eastern Church, right? And you had
Hmm.
like, Jews living in this area as well. Uh, and there still are today. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is the majority of the population did, over a period of time, over decades, over centuries, just the dawah that was done after this place was brought into the fold of what we would call, Dar al Islam, the places where, Muslims are ruling over these places, and they're, uh, you know, administrating things according to the God's revelation, Allah subhanahu wa
Yeah.
ta'ala's, the Sharia, as we'd call it in Islam, right? In the Arabic term.
Mhm.
It took several decades, centuries, for these people to, become Muslim into droves. But they did eventually end up becoming Muslim. So this is the, one unfortunate, misconception I still see today, even though it's been, you know, uh, for the most part, basically, what's it called, debunked, right? This is something I think people would, once they understand that aspect, that look, the people that are living in these places, uh, you know, it, they're doing it, they're become Muslim because the idea is transcendent, a bond, like
Yes.
it's not just bound to a specific race of people. It's not just
And
bound to a
as it
specific
should be.
time.
Yeah, as it should be. This is from our Creator.
Mm,
It should be all inclusive. And if you sit and look closely, you realize it is all inclusive. You know, I often tell people, especially like people who are just coming into the thing, this ain't that. Okay. Do not come in here thinking that part of some elite. Mm-mm. Because God is going to humble you just like he's going to do with everybody else. And there's no favoritism in that because you are a creation of Allah. So you're going to get the
mm,
same treatment. Whatever you're striving for, whatever you're willing to do or not do, that's between you and Allah. I always tell people Islam is not a faith of you can and you can't, but more of would you or will you, won't you, you know? Because that choice is up to you and it's between you and your Lord. So I always tell, you know, people who are striving to learn about Islam and new Muslims, open their mind,
mm,
open your brain, because some of this stuff is about to blow your wig back. You're not even prepared for the massive inclusion that is in Islam, from women and men, the conflict there, from parents and children, to community and neighbors, to associates and friends, enemies, people who you work by, at all aspects of life. Our creator, all aspects of life, our creator has given us this guidance in the Quran and through the example of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of them. And so you start to realize you're a very small nugget in this whole situation. And whatever it is that you truly want in your heart, whatever it is that you truly striving for, and for most of us, that's Jannah. Alhamdulillah. May Allah make it easy for us and may He accept
Ameen.
us in Jannah. Ameen. But those become the things that start to drive you. If you want money, if you want clout, if you want fame, if you want your name across, lights or whatever the case may be, Allah may even bless you with that. He may even give you that just so you can see how small it is in comparison to what, the reward of Jannah is for us. So it's got to be all inclusive because it was God who created it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be
Yeah.
so animated, but this really gets me. I really want people to understand this ain't that, and don't think that it is. Go and find out for real, so you can be amongst those who know some truth
Mm,
about this thing.
yeah. Of course, it, Islam, subhanAllah, it's that's why, the apparently the term religion back in the day, it had that kind of connotation of a way of life.
Yeah,
But now it's like people, we view it in the way of modernity. We view it in the way that it's just a blind faith kind of things that people do, some rules that people follow, some rituals that
right.
people do, and it's empty and
Rituals,
it's
yeah,
not, it doesn't have any meaning. For that reason, it's better, to describe Islam as it's not religion in that way. It's a full way of life. We have the Sharia, and of course, we have certain do's and don'ts that are there, certain things that we do. But the idea is that, you know, with the things that you do when you're by yourself in any situation that you're in, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees what you're doing. That God is omnipresent. He sees everything. So that has there's the aspect of like, personal accountability and personal relationship and closeness with God, the creator.
SubhanAllah is it reminds me of when I used to teach. I used to be a school teacher,
Mm,
and I had really small children, and I always wanted to know what was their perspective of who and what God was without anything attached. And so when they would do something wrong or get in trouble, um, I would say, "Do you want God to be upset with you?"
mm,
Right away. It was like, "No, I don't, I don't want God to be upset with me." Okay, so you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And I remember just thinking like, and then later reading and learning that Allah said He put that in our soul, that He was our Lord when He created us. And so innately we know that within ourselves and within our spirit, but we come out, we find different things, different paths, and different people, and some of that stuff starts to get kind of cloudy.
yeah, subhanallah.
But
It's
innately, naturally, we know Allah.
yeah. There's one hadith, right, of the prophetic report from Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he says that every single person is born on something called a fitra, like a natural disposition, like a natural way in which God has created them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made them. He made them already knowing, recognizing their Lord, the creator of the universe. But then
Yeah,
over time, right, the way children are brought up in the household of a Christian, the child will become a Christian, obviously. If he's born in the household of a Buddhist, he'll be like that, and Hindu, whatever way of life, you
yeah,
want to pick, they will become like that because they're socialized like that, they're taught like that. But the normal, original way that human beings have been made is knowing the one God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
yeah.
It's actually interesting that you mentioned that you did that test with kids too, because there's been researchers that they've actually done surveys and tests, even in um, societies where they don't believe in God, like in like kind of Chinese backgrounds.
Mm.
Apparently, in China,
Okay.
in Chinese language, they don't have a specific word for like monotheistic God that created everything, but still
Okay.
they observed that children, they naturally thought that the world came from somewhere, that somebody had to have made the world,
Yeah.
somebody had designed everything.
Yeah.
All different types of backgrounds, they notice this as like a set belief in children,
Mhm.
which subhanallah, when they
Already
become
got.
older, they socialize out of them.
Yeah. May Allah keep our children on the straight path and continue to give us beneficial guidance and knowledge. I mean,
I mean.
yeah.
So, all right, we've talked a bit about like your path in finding the truth. So, and we've also shared some nuggets of advice for those that are interested on finding it themselves. So, do you have any advice for those that, alhamdulillah, they've accepted Islam now? They know that basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, that He is one. They
Mm-hmm.
believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's message. What would be your advice for the new Muslim? Kind of that first year, it's a lot of like probably changes that they'll have to go through, a lot of things that they'll have to consider. Can you offer some advice for this person?
Yeah. SubhanAllah, Bismillah. Within the last year, we've seen an influx of all kind of people discovering and finding Islam and becoming Muslim. And some of them by way of social media, some of them by way of, finding out things around the world that are happening. Some of them just by interacting, with other Muslims more these days. But I would certainly advise anybody. Number one, solidify your intention. Make sure that you're doing this for the sake of Allah. I mean, this is coming from somebody who, studied Islam with the intention of dispelling it, right? Um, but I've had to learn over time that everything that we decide to do or not do should stem from our intention to please Allah. And so if you're going to learn this, don't do it because it's a trend. If you're going to find out about Islam, don't do it because enamored with somebody. Do it because you truly want to know and understand who your Lord and Creator is, and you want to know and understand what it is that He's asking of you to get the ultimate. And of course, that's Jannah, alhamdulillah. So take your time, pace yourself, keep your mouth shut. Everybody does not have to know everything that's going on with you. Um, Again, from somebody who didn't learn that lesson till later. When I first became Muslim, I was like, I'm screaming and telling everybody, oh, we doing this and he's doing that. Not realizing everybody's, can't take, certain things, and it's not, for everybody at that time in that way. So I had to learn to keep quiet, to study on my own pace, so that I wasn't messing with nobody's expectations of who and what I should be as a Muslim at this point by now, how I should speak, how I should dress. I really had to learn to take my time, because when I define or refine my intention to please Allah, I realized that okay, this is going to happen on His time, and He's going to give me the grace. So take that grace, pace yourself, take little bits at a time, and then put on a little bit at a time. Even now after 22 years, I'm still not like a perfect Muslim. I don't do everything right. I don't,
Yeah,
I ain't this
as
holy,
everybody,
subhanallah. So it's still something that I'm striving for every day, where I'm taking little by little by little and applying it, little by little as I go, because this is my life. This is not a fad or a trend or something that I'm going to get sick of. This is how I live my life. So my advice would be to take your time, be sincere in wanting to please your Lord, and keep it to yourself for a little bit.
What was it like after you'd accepted Islam yourself? What was that first year like for you?
Uh, um, it was tough. It was tough because I was entangled in a lot of different situations and circumstances. Um, and me accepting Islam, I didn't realize was going to affect those situations and circumstances, as well as a lot of the people. So right off the bat, I had to choose between Allah and certain situations and people. And that was really hard because, I'm for the first time I'm having to make decisions based on what I knew about my Lord,
Mm.
and not just what I wanted or didn't want. So that first year was pretty tough. My grandmother and I, we kind of, fell off a little bit. We were very close. And when I told her about Islam, when I told her what I learned about Islam, um, you know, that's the devil's work. That's the devil's work. And she didn't want to hear anything about it. And that was my best friend at the time. Like we talked about everything, and she didn't want to hear it. And she was pretty angry at me for um, learning it. Even though it enhanced my relationship with Jesus alayhi salam, it enhanced my understanding of Jesus alayhi salam. She just wasn't feeling it, and so um, we had to learn to live around that. SubhanAllah. She's
Mm.
returned back to Allah now. May Allah give her children and her family comfort in His will and guide them to Islam. Ameen.
I mean,
But we never kind of got around it. So that first year, I would say probably the first few years was pretty tough. Again, I was a young woman. I was in college, sort of, getting the feel of my free reigns, if you will. And, I had to learn really quickly, about discipline and definition and adapt, my mannerisms and how to present and be as a woman in Islam. So it was pretty tough.
Yeah, subhanallah. It's, you know, those challenges, subhanallah. Ultimately, I feel like, the whole life is a test, right? So with
Yeah.
every single test that we go through, every hardship that we go through, subhanallah, after you come out of it, and inshallah, when we learn the lesson, it's like
Uh-huh.
we can't even imagine our life without having gone through
True.
that and having an like,
Yeah. True.
developed from that. It's the positive side of it, subhanallah. It's
Yeah. I
something to
can't.
be
I
aware
can't
of,
imagine. Yeah.
right?
I mean, even from like just the way we dress, like, for yourself, just the way that you present, your beard, your mannerisms, how you dress, all of that says, who and what you are as a Muslim, as a man. And you don't care about what I think, right? You doing this for the sake of Allah, and that transcends a lot of things. And it just makes it that more valuable to understand, because we got to get out of this life at some point, right? So,
Mm,
subhanAllah, these things that we do and not do, the things that we learn, these are going to be things that carry us in the akhirah, in the hereafter. Alhamdulillah.
no. So you mentioned that you have the podcast, uh, Ghetto Muslim Chronicles, right?
Yeah, the Ghetto Muslim Chronicles. I put it on YouTube. It's it's something that started out really, just a little bit, but mashallah.
Khair, alhamdulillah. So what's like now? What's life like now? Maybe you can give us an episode from the Chronicles. What is life like now? 20 years on, alhamdulillah. Still going
Um,
strong as a Muslim here in Chicago.
yeah, definitely. The last episode that I recorded was actually a trip to the masjid. Because people hear me say, "Oh, I gotta go pray," or they'll say, hear me say, "Oh, I'm going to the masjid, to do this or do that." Mashallah, hold on. But they never know like what it is that I'm actually doing, or where it is that we actually go to pray. Mashallah. So I took a trip to the masjid, and just kind of brought some of the listeners into the intimacy of taking the time out of your day to go and worship Allah, whether somebody's watching or not, whether somebody sees it or not, and then going back to the crazy chaos in your day or what have you. Um, it's full of findings. It's full of learning, continuing to still learn. It's full of exploration. People are crazy and can be very overwhelming with what they think. Okay. And so dealing with social media, and that openness is a notion in itself. May Allah protect us
I
from
mean,
misguidance and from harm and evil. And me while we do this. But the Ghetto Muslim Chronicles is just there to share and show what it's like just being a Muslim every day, regardless.
yeah. It's like Islam is it's the belief, it's the practice as well. You know,
Yeah.
to truly understand what it means to be a Muslim, to be somebody who's in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like the word Muslim is built on the word Islam, Islam meaning submission, right? So the word
Yeah.
itself of the whole deen, of the whole religion is like, it's like a verb, to really
Yes.
understand that you have to live it. You have to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have to be able to, practice on it. Then that's what
Exhibit it. Yeah.
exactly. It's so
Yeah.
critical. Through those things, that's what we really get an understanding of, what it means to be Muslim, what it
To
means
be
to know
Muslim,
the
yeah.
Creator, all these things.
Because this is not for the weak. You can't be a weak person, because you can't, there's no compulsory, so you can't just follow something or follow somebody in Islam. You have to be strong enough to get out and learn, and you have to be courageous enough to apply those things to your life for the sake of pleasing your Lord, regardless of what people think or see or say or what have you. And we don't always get it right, you know um but having Islam as this measure, as this tool to go through your life, as you learn how to correct, you learn how to make up, you learn how to give in and humble yourself, and put your priorities in pleasing Allah. So once you get this kind of understanding, the dance between your regular life and who you are as a spiritual or religious person, those things start to gel pretty easily. But it takes some time. Nobody does it overnight. And for
Mm.
those who try to, it becomes so overwhelming that it almost cracks them. So you have to take your time. You have to be intentional in how you exhibit what it is, that you do. Um, I'm learning now about, the Quran, how to read and recite. And subhanAllah, uh, it's very detailed and very meticulous because you have to poise yourself a certain way to say a word or speak a word a certain way, or else you
Mm.
mess it up and it's something totally different. And so it's the same way with your deen. You have to learn how to apply these things and present yourself in a certain way because it's all encompassing. It's our whole life.
There's that popular saying that the road is long and the provisions you take on this journey is very little. So you have to, like,
Mhm.
remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And
Ah,
the qira'ah, like reciting the Quran, subhanallah, is just one example of how, deep, subhanallah, the
mhm.
knowledge that is there in Islam that's been
Yes.
built on, for 1400 years, subhanallah, since
Yeah.
the passing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on to the next life. It's the there's always something to learn. There's always something to,
Always.
like, to look forward to, subhanallah, in nearing Allah
Mhm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's in nearing the creator and, understanding more about our place in the world. Uh the people that recite Quran, like the qaris, if, like, I remember I was listening to one recitation that somebody posted, and I was like, "Wow, mashallah, it's, yeah, amazing. The way he's reciting the Quran, it's so beautiful." And then somebody responded to it. He was a qari, and he said, "He made this mistake. He made this mistake." And it's like, I
Yeah,
didn't even know.
yeah,
It sounded
yeah,
completely fine to
yeah,
me. It sounds better than how I recite.
yeah. That's how it is. And having that awareness that even in your best attempt, it's not gonna be, it's still gonna fall short. I mean, we're talking about Allah, like, you know. So these attempts and these things and these deeds that we doing, like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, to do them in your capacity, do them in the way that is comfortable and good for you, so that don't take you off your square, but continue to always strive to perfect it. Isn't that
Mm.
something?
Oh,
Subhanallah. So,
subhanallah.
it brings us to, a point and a time in our lives where we have to make the decision every day. And I'm sure, as somebody who grew up in an Islamic home as a Muslim, it becomes just, everyday life, my number. Every day we have to get up and say, okay, am I going to do this again? I messed this up yesterday. I didn't get this right. I did this. I didn't do that. Okay, but subhanAllah, it's Fajr. Again, I got another chance. How am I going to go about it today? Am I going to strive harder? Am I going to fall for the same, pitfalls? Am I going to give in, to the same whispers of the shaitan? May Allah protect us from that. I mean,
I mean,
but it's a daily thing, and that becomes the shape of your life and who you are, your characteristics, who you are as a person, um just comes from waking up every day and deciding, okay, all right, I'm gonna put this hijab back on. All right, okay, I'm gonna stay in my lane and stay in my place as a person, as a Muslim, again, and hopefully this is something that pleases my Lord.
inshallah. I think this is a great place for us to, bring an end to the discussion. As we say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God most exalted, is two of his names is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, which, if those of you that are non-Muslim, maybe you've heard the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, right? So this is something which is so integral, like that God is saying that He is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, Ar-Rahim, the especially merciful for those that believe in Him. So it's it's an everyday process, you know. Nobody is obviously nobody is perfect. We all have go through ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we have this idea that we cannot pay back God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for every single thing that He gave us. But at least we recognize our relationship to Him, to our Creator, that there is nothing else to do but to acknowledge that and to try your best. So, Jazakallah khairan, Sister Zakiya. It's a pleasure having you on. Inshallah, we can discuss again soon. Those of you that are
Inshallah.
watching at home, Jazakallah khairan for tuning in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide and preserve all of us. And inshallah, we will catch you guys next week. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Before we shut,
Yes.
please make dua for my mom. She is a woman of God. She's following Christianity, and I'm just asking anybody with a sincere dua to please make dua for my mom to accept Islam and to be a Muslim. My dad and my siblings, subhanallah, please, her name is Miss Johnson, make dua for my mom. La ilaha illallah.
Of course.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide your mother, inshallah, to Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the light of Iman in her heart, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open the ways to Him for her. Ameen. Thumma ameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide her and the rest of your family to al-haq. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khairan, tuning in. We'll catch you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر